All right, we're taking another look today at applying linear functions. Now, if we're applying these functions, we're dealing with story problems. We're dealing with a real-world scenario. And if we want to write a function for a real-world scenario, anytime we're dealing with any story problem, we read it a bunch of times, at least 3. But what's the very first thing that we write down? Okay, we need to clearly define the variables. Clearly define those variables. Now, it is math class, so we're going to be drawn to the numbers. However, for a linear function, and for any application really, with algebra, if we're defining the variable's not going to represent a number. The variables in a linear function are going to be the two quantities that are changing together. Two quantities that are changing together. Okay, so they're probably not going to have numbers attached to them. They're going to be the two things in the story that are changing throughout the story. They're not constant, they're changing. That's why they're called variables. Now we use x and we use y. Once I figure out what two quantities are changing, how am I going to know which one's which? Very good. X is the cause, y is the effect. Now there's a big tip that I gave you the other day. I said if you figure out your two variables and one of them is time, okay, whether it's seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, doesn't matter. If it's a unit of time, it's probably going to be which variable? Just say it. Just say it. X. Good. Okay? So if we come up with time as one of our variables, we can almost guarantee it's going to be x. Okay? So I clearly define my x and my y. Then I read the equation again, and I list my slope and my y-intercept. Now m is the y-intercept, m is the slope, m is the slope, m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. When I'm looking for the slope, I'm trying to figure out what number goes in place of m. What I'm looking for is a rate. I'm looking for y's per x. Okay, always y's per x. That's why I have to define my x and y first. If I define x and y first, I can find my slope. I just look for a place in the story where they say y's per x. Okay, so if we look at the story and it's about someone working, and we determine that x is hours working and y is money earned, what I'm looking for is dollars per hour, y's per x. What about the y-intercept? What's my indicator for the y-intercept? You're allowed to look at what we wrote down before. What's the y-intercept going to be? Good, look it up. Dig out those old notes and find it. It's the starting point. Very good. It's the starting point. It's how many y's when x is 0. It's what you have for y at the very beginning of the story. And then once we have all those pieces, we can sub into y equals mx plus b. So we clearly define the variables. Okay, whether we're dealing with functions or regular old algebraic equations, that has to happen first. Find our slope and our y-intercept. Slope is the rate, y's per x. Y-intercept is the starting point. How many y's we have when x is 0. Then we sub all those pieces into the function. Now, the second part, kind of a part B to the question, is going to be applying that function. Okay? And what's going to happen, guys, they're going to give you either a value of x or a value of y. We have to determine if the given value is x or a y. Bless you. We figure out whether it's an x or a y. It's going to be one or the other. Okay, then we substitute for that variable and solve the other. Okay, so our story before that we mentioned where someone's working, we figure out that X is hours worked and Y is dollars earned. Well, they want to know how long it's going to take them to earn $100. That's a value of Y. We'd sub it in place of Y and we'd solve for X. Now, the last part. We're dealing with story problems. We want a complete sentence answer. Okay? And ask yourself, does that seem reasonable? Okay? If we want to know how long it's going to take this person to earn $100, and we determine that it's going to take them 365 hours, that's unreal. That's very unreasonable that they'd work 365 hours just to earn $100. Okay, that's not reasonable. If we determine that they have to work a half hour to earn $100, well, you find out what job that is, and you get that job because that's paying you really darn well. Okay? It's not reasonable. Ask yourself, does that answer seem reasonable? Okay? So, let's start here. Let's read this story, and let's define our variables. Let's begin with that. So, read this story for us, please. Linear. Okay. When we see write a linear function, that's the indicator that they want y equals mx plus b. Okay, this second part, use your function. Okay, that's kind of our part B. We're going to set that aside and we'll come back to it. Right now we want to focus on y equals mx plus b. We need to define our variables. Now it's math class, so we're going to gravitate towards the quizzes that he has checked already and the 14 quizzes that he checks per hour. But here's the thing though, guys. Those aren't changing. Okay? He is going to continue to check 14 every hour. That's not changing. The 28 quizzes that he has checked at the beginning of the story, that's not changing. That was done. What is changing are the quizzes checked and the hours working. When they tell you to write that function, guys, they're telling you what x and y are. They flat out state it relates quizzes checked to hours working. Those are going to be my variables. Those are going to be my x and my y. Now, hours working. Hours is a unit of time. What did we say? If time is one of our variables, it's probably going to be x. So the hours working is x. The quizzes checked is our y. Okay, then we go back again, and we look for an m, and we look for a b, a rate. Okay, we're looking for a place where they tell us quizzes checked per hour, y's per x. Okay, and what do we see?
14.
Okay, he checks 14 quizzes per hour. Okay, we also need a starting point. Okay, how many quizzes he has checked at the beginning of the story? 28. Okay, now we have everything we need to make y equals mx plus b. And we'll have y equals 14x plus 28. Okay, and that's the first part of the story. First part of the question. Now, the second part, use that function to determine how long it will take him to check all 91 quizzes. Well, 91 quizzes. That's the given. That's our given value. We need to figure out, is that an x or is it a y? Well, if we define our variables carefully at the beginning, we don't have to think too much. It's quizzes. Y is quizzes. That means that 91 quizzes is a value of y. So we take that 91 quizzes and we'll put it in place of y. And we'll say 91 equals 14x plus 28. And now we have a two-step algebraic equation. We know how to solve this. We'll subtract 28 from both sides. And we'll have 63 equals 14x. We'll divide both sides by 14. And we'll have 4.5 equals x. So, we have our solution. We want to write that complete sentence answer. Now, we'd like to include both x and y values here. Okay, so y is 91 quizzes, x is 4.5 hours. So, we can say, the question was, how long will it take him to check all 91 quizzes? It will take him 4.5 hours to check 91 quizzes. Now, ask yourself, does that seem reasonable? Okay, I have 91 quizzes to check. Okay, say it's a quiz, so say there's 10 questions. Okay, does it sound reasonable that it's going to take me 4.5 hours to get them all done? Probably. Okay, got news for you guys. Actually, probably takes me longer than that to check all the quizzes. But it's a reasonable answer. Okay. All right, let's look at number 2. Read number 2 for us, please.
That relates days to meet teachers meet. How many teachers will he meet by the end of a 5-day work week?
All right. So, write a linear function. That means y equals mx plus b. With how many teachers will he meet by the end of a 5-day work week? That's our part B. Okay, so we set that aside, and we'll come back to it. We don't want to worry about that number right now. What do we need to worry about right away? What's the first thing we need to write down as far as answering this question? Variables. We need to define our variables. We need to figure out what two things are changing together. Well, if we read carefully, they'll tell us exactly what two things are changing together. Okay, what two things are changing in this story? Days meeting and teachers met. Okay, those are our two variables. We need to figure out, though, which one's x, which one's y. Which one's the cause, which one's the effect. Which means, very good. Okay, also, days is a unit of time. So, probably our x. Okay, so we have our x and our y. Now we need an m and a b. Okay, so we go back and we read it again. Bless you. And we look for a place where they say y per x. Teachers met per day. 3 more teachers every day. Teachers per day. Now we need B. We need a starting point. How many teachers he's met at the beginning of this story? 7 teachers. Okay, so now we have everything we need. We can sub into y equals mx plus b. Okay, what's that going to look like? Yeah, you. No, not you, him. Good. Sorry, you both had your mouths covered. I wasn't sure who said it. Okay. Good. We have y equals 3x plus 7. Great. That's part A. That's my linear function. Now the part B, they're going to give us either an x or a y. We need to figure out which one they've given us. So we look at this part B. With how many teachers will he meet by the end of a 5-day work week? Okay, they've given us 5 days. Okay, that's the number. Is it an x or is it a y? It's an x. Okay, we said the day's meeting was x, so 5 days is a value of x. So we'll take that 5 days and we'll sub it in place of x. And we'll say y equals 3 times 5 plus 7. Well, 3 times 5 is 15, plus 7 is 22. So now we want our complete sentence answer. Okay, let's see. Can you give me a complete sentence answer here? Very good. Mr. Radcliffe will meet 22 teachers by the end of a 5-day work week. Okay, now stop and ask, does that seem reasonable? Okay, he's meeting 3 every day for 5 days. Does it seem reasonable? Yeah. Okay, it's very reasonable. Okay, take him about a week to see 22 teachers. Sure. All right. Okay, no questions. Then we'll go over to the back. Tell you what, let's look at that story about Melech. Melech, why don't you read that story about Melech? It's like mathception in here. Okay, so that linear function business again. Y equals mx plus b. Okay. Now they've also given us a part B. What will her profits be after selling 20 drawings? Okay, so we'll set that part B aside. What do we need right away? The very first thing that we're going to write down. The variables. Okay, so we're looking for the 2 things that are changing. What 2 things are changing in this story? Very good. Drawing sold and her profits. Okay, and they tell us that. When they say write the linear function, her drawing sold and her profits. They're telling us that those two things are changing. And if you read the story, think about it. Okay, she's selling drawings. She's making money. Well, how much money she makes is affected by how many drawings she sells. Okay, those two things are changing. And if we think about that relationship, that tells us which one's X and which one's Y. What do you think, which one's causing the other one to change? Good. The drawing sold is causing her profits to change. Great. So we have our X and our Y. We have the tough part taken care of. Once we have this, guys, everything else falls into place. Okay, because then we can look for a rate. We can look for Y's per X, profits per drawing. Well, what do we have as far as profits per drawing? $8. That's her profits per drawing. Okay, what about B? B is the y-intercept. It's our starting point. Okay, that's how many profits she has after selling 0 drawings. Negative 45. Why negative? Very, very good. Excellent. Okay, it's negative 45 because she spent $45. Profits are money that you get to keep. Not only did she not get to keep that $45, she had to lose that $45. Okay, so our B is negative 45. Sorry, Malek, got to spend money to make money. Okay, now we have everything we need to sub them in. Okay, Jake, can you give me that equation, please? Very good. Y equals 8x plus a negative 45. Now, you took it a step farther because you know we don't like to keep plus a negative. So we change that to y equals 8x minus 45. And there's our part A. Okay, there's our equation. Now, guys, once we make that equation, we can answer any question about how much money she's going to make or how many drawings she'll have to do to sell to make that profit. As long as we have one of those variables, we can find the other one. So we look at this green part. We look at this part B. Okay? What have they given us here? 20 drawings. And is that a value of X or is that a value of Y? It's an X. Okay? It's a number of drawings. And we said X was drawings. So we'll take those 20 drawings and we'll put them in place of X. Okay? And what's that going to look like? Good. 8 times 20 minus 45. Well, y is already by itself, so we can just do the arithmetic. 8 times 20 is 160 minus 45 gives us 115. Okay, now we need a complete sentence. A complete sentence, please. Malek will make a profit of $115 after selling 20 drawings. Malek will make a profit of $115 after selling 20 drawings. Okay, now think. Does this seem reasonable? She sells 20 drawings at $8 a piece minus the 45 she spent on supplies. Does that seem reasonable? Seems pretty good. Malek, start selling those drawings. Make yourself some good money, okay? And then cut me in for, a finder's fee or something like that because I gave you the idea of selling. Well, still cut me in for 10%, just for fun. Okay. So, guys, when we're working through these, the most important part, more than anything else, is defining the variables, X and Y, input, output, cause, and effect. very carefully, very clearly. They're the two things that are changing together. Okay, then go back, find your slope and your y-intercepts, your rate of change, your y's per x, and your starting point. Okay, how many y's you have when x is 0, start of the story. Sub everything into the equation. That's going to give you your y equals mx plus b. Then, the second part, they want to know what our profits will be after 20 drawings. They're giving you a value of either x or y. Sub it in place of that variable and solve for the other one. Write a complete sentence answer and make sure it makes sense. Make sure it seems reasonable. Okay? If you get that she's going to have a profit of negative $6 after selling 20 paintings, either something's wrong or she needs to rethink her business strategy. Okay? Because she's losing money after selling 20 drawings. If you get that she's going to have $11,000 after selling 20 drawings, well, maybe, but not at $8 per drawing. Okay, it's where you have to consider the parameters of the story. They say that she's selling them for $8 a piece. She's not going to have thousands of dollars on 20 drawings, not at that rate. Okay, now if she increases the price, sure. But you have to consider the parameters of the story. Okay? So, when we're working through to write our function, clearly define the variables. List your slope and y-intercepts. Make the y equals mx plus b. For the second part, for the applying part, determine if the given value is x or y. Sub for that variable, solve for the other. And when you write your complete sentence answer, don't just write it and be done. Write it and ask, does this fit my story? Does it make sense? If it does, you're probably good. If not, you made a mistake. So go back and find it. Okay?